There are a lot of promises in the industry right now. A promise that Valve is being sued because they enable gambling and that's for our own good. Warner Brothers talks about fruits coming in 2027 and 2028 but offers no specifics. Xbox insists that there is no pressure from Microsoft on AI, while Sony rethinks PC releases. After years of reversals, layoffs and sudden pivots, it's getting harder to separate genuine course correction from corporate damage control. Let's take Valve, for example. The company just cannot catch a break. Shortly after settling the legal battle with Rothschild, they are now being sued by the New York Attorney General over the loot boxes. Yes, we are at it again. Letitia James, the AG in question, has filed a lawsuit in the New York State Supreme Court, alleging that Valve's loot box mechanics constitute illegal unlicensed gambling under New York's constitutional and penal law, because players pay real money for randomized chances at valuable virtual items. While these items are just cosmetic in gameplay, they can be resold for real-world value, either via Valve's Steam community market or third-party marketplaces, creating a de facto gambling ecosystem. She also claims that Valve made billions of dollars from this model that targets young adults, leading to addiction and harm, and seeks a permanent injunction against the practices, restitution to affected customers, and fines for up to 3 times the profits from this alleged illegal activity. But there are a lot of arguments on both sides. The company will likely argue that Steam Wallet and item markets are not gambling, and that contractual terms explicitly prohibit real-world cash-outs. So the complaint should better target those third parties instead of Valve themselves. Also, there is a big difference between Steam Wallet and real cash, but then again, it's for lawyers to decide. There is also an argument to be made that this is a cash grab, plain and simple. If the harm was so bad, why you wait so long? The first loot boxes appeared in games decades ago, back in early 2000s if I'm not mistaken. I don't want to get into whether loot boxes are good or bad, as it's a huge can of worms in itself, but this case sets an interesting precedent and the world is watching. So this case might be signal to other states and countries to revisit this topic and introduce more enforcement. And if Valve loses, it will set the stage for some major repercussions for gaming companies. Hundreds of games rely on loot boxes for monetization, not only Dota 2 and Counter-Strike, and by extension the companies developing those games. If regulations tighten, we might face yet another crisis with layoffs, studio closures, and project cancellations. The industry already suffers from greedy executives, and now being threatened by greedy regulators? I mean, haven't we been through enough? I think the time to really get into this whole topic was years ago. For example, when EA was putting them everywhere, and honestly every other company. I'm not saying it's different now, but a lot of games already shifted toward battle passes, which are clearly a lot less random. And in fact, a lot of people praise the return of loot boxes in games like Overwatch, for example. So is it a promise to make things better, or an attempt for regulators to grab some quick cash from the video game developers? Now, Warner Brothers teases the return of the biggest franchises, as the year 2025 was very troubling for the company and its gaming division. But they promise they are planning to turn things around. According to a recent interview with Variety, the leadership team looked back on the past year. The company got distracted by going after too many IPs with too broad a set of studios. But now they are reorganizing, and we'll see quote-unquote fruits coming in 27 and 28, when they return to some of their biggest franchises. Naturally, of course, they didn't talk about the specifics and which franchises they meant exactly. While some desperate fans, like me for example, might hope for some new titles in the Middle-earth franchise, the company is probably talking about either Harry Potter, DC, Game of Thrones, or Mortal Kombat, as they mentioned before. The first one is already confirmed to be in production, but it could be any one of those really. This is all great, but it sounds like a political campaign slogan. No concrete information, no timelines, no project names, and no roadmaps. And since the company already has a reputation for making games that, for lack of a better word, get mixed reception at best, like Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, and Multiverses, this statement does little to reassure anyone. The commitment to core franchises is great, but we gamers need tangible evidence. We need to see something to believe it, especially in times like this. And since the company is in the middle of being bought, who knows what's going to happen. I don't want to sound too negative, but the gaming division might not even exist in another year. I hope that's not the case, as I honestly love so many of their franchises. And I also hope that at least at some point the companies will stop making empty promises like that. I don't want to get my hopes up all the time for no good reason, and I'm sure you don't either. Speaking of the acquisition, it appears that after the latest bidding, Netflix is slowly backing off from Warner Brothers. According to The Hollywood Reporter, Paramount recently increased its bid in the big battle with Netflix to $31 per share and said it will pay a $7 billion regulatory termination fee if the transaction does not close due to regulatory matters. Meaning that if the acquisition fails specifically because of regulations, Paramount would owe Warner Brothers Discovery $7 billion. Shortly after that, Netflix shared a statement saying that the deal is quote-unquote no longer financially attractive, and the company refused to match the bid from Paramount, effectively backing away from the whole thing. So it looks like Paramount came out on top after all. To be clear, the acquisition is not done and it still has to go through said regulations and all that, but with Netflix no longer in the picture, there is almost nothing in the way of Paramount. While this is definitely a big deal in terms of the streaming landscape, we still don't know what it means for the gaming division. Paramount has a lot of IPs, sure, but they are not really in the game development business. The company usually provides licenses for their IPs to other studios, and that's it. And honestly, I find it very unlikely that they're going to change that policy with Warner Brothers. So my best guess is that after the acquisition closes, they're going to sell the gaming division for parts and license the IPs to others. At least that's what I would have done instead of jumping into an industry they know nothing about. Which could mean that we should expect more layoffs and studio closures in near future. But then again, maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it is the avenue Paramount wants to pursue. I'm not the one to take sides in things like that, but if we are only talking about video games, Netflix would have been a better choice, as they clearly want to be a game developer. Also, quick thing, if you don't know who I am, my name is Alex, I'm a game producer and I'm here to help you get caught up on everything that's going on in the video game industry. Xbox also promises a lot of things lately. With Asha Sharma being appointed the new CEO, everybody, myself included, started thinking that there was a foul play involved and that Microsoft was trying to push some sort of AI agenda. Well, according to the newly appointed Chief Content Officer, that's not the case. In a recent interview with Windows Central, Matt Booty explicitly denied that and said there is quote-unquote no pressure from Microsoft to integrate AI in Xbox games, and reiterated a vision that AI should be supportive, not mandated. Teams inside Xbox are free to use any technologies that might be beneficial, whether it's helping write code or check for bugs or things more in the production pipelines. And also echoed the previous statement from Sharma that the company is committed to art made by people. Technology is only there to support it. While it's definitely a positive sign that the company tries to clear the air, do we really believe that? I mean, I want to believe it, but surely if they were to say out loud there is a directive, their own customers and partners might revolt. They don't want that. But who's to say that there won't be a push next year when the dust settles? Microsoft is investing heavily in AI. It remains a part of a game dev pipeline, and until recently it was the main competence of a newly elected CEO. Also, Matt Booty is one of the recently elected people. Surely he wants to do everything in his power to stay in the position of power. So he has to play ball and say whatever he is being told to say. I don't know, I feel like with everything that's going on in the industry, corporations betrayed the trust of their customers so many times at this point that it's hard to believe anything they say. This is all a good sign, but we'll see if they can keep that promise. At least one company looks true to their words, as it looks like Wolfenstein 3 is indeed in development, and according to the recently opened casting, we also know some of the details about it. Reported by MP First, a casting call was recently uncovered for the project codenamed Valkyrie, and the people involved in it were the ones who previously worked on several projects at Machine Games. The shooting is scheduled to start in April and continue through 2026, maybe even extend into 2027. As for the story, the casting call went out for a character named Sofia, a Ukrainian orphan between the ages of 8 and 11, who has a dog named Ralph and is set to form a bond with BJ Blazkowicz and accompany him on his travels. The outlet speculates that this might mean a potential child protector story arc similar to The Last of Us. So, as you can see, all signs point to the new game moving forward and being in full production mode. Of course, it's going to be a while before we see anything on our screens. The narrative idea sounds a little bit dated, as a lot of people are doing somewhat similar stories, but the devil is in the details, right? In any event, my guess is that the project will be released sometime in 2028 at best, as games like this are not easy to develop. Also, it looks like the promise of console wars being over was a premature one. While some of us, and I'm certainly one of them, enjoy the trend of Sony releasing their exclusives on PC, this might come to an end soon. In a recent episode of Triple Click Podcast, Jason Schreier, Kirk Hamilton, and Maddie Myers talked a lot about the recent Xbox leadership shakeup. But they also talked about Sony. According to Schreier, Sony is considering bringing back the full exclusivity thing with their most prominent single-player titles, while still releasing live service ones across all platforms. What's even more troubling is that he said that it's quote-unquote not a speculation, and that we'll hear more about it quite soon, which means that he must have some insider knowledge of that. And I honestly don't get why. Why would Sony do something like this? Sure, by not releasing those games on PC, they are adding a bigger incentive for players to buy their consoles. And that might work, but there are other factors to consider as well. For example, the global RAM and SSD shortage. If they do this, are they sure they're going to keep up with all the demand? And that's without us talking about next-gen potential first-party handhelds and similar things. Secondly, PC ports have historically extended the commercial life of Sony's franchises and introduced PlayStation IPs to a broader audience. Of course, none of these releases had huge numbers, but they still extend franchise visibility and provide additional revenue streams post-console launch, especially years after the fact. I really don't see how that's worth it. Surely the short-term boost in console sales is worth less than the value of the ports. Or maybe they teach some high-level stuff at business schools that I'm not aware of. And to wrap things up, it looks like the expectations were correct, and the no longer mysterious backer of Wildlight Entertainment, Tencent, decided to pull their funding after the disastrous launch of Highguard. According to Bloomberg, the mass layoffs that happened recently is actually because of Tencent. While not officially confirmed, the assumption is that the financing deal was contingent on the game reaching certain milestones after the launch. And since the launch was anything but a successful one, Tencent decided not to give the game any chances at all and quickly backed out. With that, the report suggests that fewer than 20 people remain at Wildlight Entertainment and try to keep the game alive. Curiously, the report also dives into why the launch ended up being so bad, and everyone keeps using the word hubris. Essentially, the team thought that after working on Apex Legends, they could easily replicate the success of this game with a different title. Needless to say, the landscape of multiplayer shooters have changed quite a bit since Apex was released, and that's aside from some of the gameplay decisions that the team made that didn't pan out. So it looks like we are dealing with indeed yet another Concord that's almost at the end of its lifespan, which is a pity. This game had some potential. All these stories are different, but they all have one thing in common. Every company will promise you the moon and the stars until the world pivots. Then everyone scrambles to pretend that this was the plan all along and changes the narrative. Now we have new promises of a bigger and better future. But wait, haven't we heard this one before?